All right.
All right, I think we're live.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the monthly Concrete 5 Town Hall. Thanks for joining us. This month is going to be a brief, a snappy town hall. Snappy with
moving with pep.
Moving with pep and vigor. Yeah, Thanksgiving last week and whatnot, and we've got a bunch of stuff going on. We are busy. So now we'll jump right into it. We'll start with our call-outs and thank yous. Let's see if I can share my screen here if I'm clever. I think that screen, little video feedback excitement, and here we are. Should be looking at the leaderboard for the Karma winners. And if you don't know, you get Karma points on concrete5.org for helping people, promoting the project, and doing work. And we add those up, and every week we give away a free add-on to a winner from each one of those silos. Looks like this week, Pine Creative Labs, Systematic, okay, and concrete5 Russia have all won add-ons. And if you look down below, you will see any number of rock stars, including Google, apparently. It's doing a great job promoting to see who that is.
They get some free add-ons.
Yeah,
they can use a boost.
Just a little help. We should figure out who that is. But some Concrete5 heroes in there. There's Enkele and Masuva, who is running the e-commerce project, and Steve B. And some names that are new to me: Okapi and Lucas Zanillo. I don't know. That's pretty cool. So thank you for all those people, for all the help that you do. Thank you. There's a bunch of pull requests that have been submitted in GitHub that we haven't had time to go and review yet, but looking at just a brief list that was handed to me moments ago, we've got Gutig, M. Locati, of course, P, Deke87, we know who that is.
Yes.
Faker-Ben-Ali, Faker, I don't know. Jaluki, Shirak, Biplobis,
Biplobis, yeah.
All right. Hissy and Dinklassen. So cool.
Yeah. Yeah, excellent. We have not forgotten about GitHub, just been backed up with things to do because there are lots of excellent things stacked.
We will be looking at all that stuff, and thank you very much for everything that you do. We say it every time we do one of these videos, but doesn't make it any less true. It is super cool to be part of something that is much bigger than ourselves, and we're appreciative every day. It's always fun to tell people what we do, and they say, "Wow, it's amazing that you've got this community of people and you're building something that's bigger than the sum of its parts." So thank you. We're going to move, as we said before, with alacrity, into showing off a cool Concrete5 site in the wild. I will take a moment to politely urge you to submit your best work to our showcase. I know you guys are making cool looking sites, and it's really important to share that with the world. Pretty much any time I'm talking to somebody about concrete and they ask, well, you know, what can you build with it? And show them what's a good looking site I would know. Like, it's weird because to a developer, we all know, look, you can build anything that you want. But to a business user or just someone that is more in kind of the consumer space, they just want you to show me. Just show me what can be done with your stuff. So if you've got good stuff, please submit to the showcase. We look at the showcase and we pull things out that we think would be compelling for these demos, and the idea that it'll give the folks out there some fodder for knowing what, kind of setting the bar high, if you will. So that said, let me see if I can get to the right screen. This week we are showing another site from a French agency called Systematic. We showed their site, I think, last month because it's pretty cool. And the site that we're showing that they made this time is Safran Tours. So this is a tour agency. What do you call that? A travel
agency.
That's the one. Thanks. Didn't know this company still existed. But I think this is a family-run travel agency that'll show you a good time in France.
Cool.
And it's a pretty attractive site with these kind of stripes of content that overlap each other. Oh, man. I don't want to watch a video right now. Thank you, though. lots of stuff going on in here. Of course, you know, when you're doing country tours of France, you've got some pretty nice source content to work with. So yeah, right. Like, oh, put a castle on here. What is
nice.
pretty cool is you can buy a trip. And boy, I wish I spoke French or it translates somewhere. Actually, I think this thing is multilingual. Oh, here we go. Boom, English. So we're using multilingual. Kapow.
Nice. There
Pretty
you go.
nice.
Oh yeah.
Boom.
It keeps you in the same
And
part of the site, which is always nice.
yeah, and I can book.
Oh wow.
Right. So
Here you
they're
go.
using e-commerce.
Wow. That's our login page.
Yeah, which is
Register,
e-commerce in concrete5. You can
that's awesome.
find it in GitHub. There is a project called the Community Store that is run by Masuva and is very powerful and obviously being used internationally to sell things as diverse as really expensive tours across France. So there's a project page, or excuse me, a showcase site page over here for the Safran tours, or I don't know how to pronounce that, but pretty cool, nicely described. They did the whole branding thing for them, putting a pair of glasses with some USB coming out of it. I don't know what's going on there, but pretty cool. So thank you guys for submitting that. Second month in a row that we have shown work from Sixdomatic.fr.
That's cool.
They are doing great work. I know many of the rest of you are doing great work as well. But again, I'm going to lay some guilt on you and say I don't see that much of it being submitted to the showcase. So take a moment out, submit something to the showcase. We'll look at it and we'll show it here and we'll drop your agency name, and you know, that can't be bad.
No.
All right.
Not at all.
What else we got here? New and news? Nope. Nothing particularly new and news and exciting. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff going on here. There's some big client projects that are wrapping up, and the redesign and you know, of the community and the new forums and marketplace and single sign-on. All that stuff is emerging. We've got wireframes on a bunch of whiteboards over there. We've got some comps. All very exciting. So exciting, I would say, that we're not willing to show it with you yet. We want to make sure that it is dialed in and kind of have a big reveal. But we're pretty stoked on that. The last thing, well, we're going to do two things. We're going to do a show and tell with Andy around the containers that are working into the core with version 9. Yeah. And whilst we do that, if there's any cues, we will happily provide A's, but you should be posting your cues to the channel now, because we're going to get back to work. We've got stuff to do. So I will do just a quick intro for you, Andy. I think we talked about this.
I think we did a last
high-level
town hall
thing at last town hall.
The GitHub issue on it.
Yeah, so the idea here started with kind of looking at how web design has matured over the years, and how many websites have these kind of stripes of layouts. And within those, you might want to put different blocks. And when concrete5 was originally kind of designed and developed, the web didn't look that way. It was much more modular kind of components in a grid. And so our whole structure of just put a block in a block area made a lot of sense when your website looked like a portal, or there's a sidebar with a nav and a main content column. But as the web has become more, I don't know, I guess I'll say brochure-y for all that, we find ourselves often building one-off blocks that are really more about layout than they are about functionality. And so we started with that, and you kind of will hear it from folks in different ways. Like, can I put a block inside of a block, right? You know, I've got this text, I've got this content block, and I want to put a survey block in it, just kind of inline. And of course, you know, our answer for 10 years has been, oh no, that'd be a nightmare. And like, please don't do that. There's no way we can pull that off. You will also find it if you are building a site and you find yourself making different ways to build something that looks the same on the front end. If you've ever made, for example, I think an easy one would be a pageless template that is like a list of links, but then you've also had to make you know, the same template for the there's a block in our marketplace that just lets you make like an ordered, or a set of links. Maybe they're off-site links or they're links to a specific page. So link list block, I think, something like that. And so if you find yourself like, man, I'm kind of dealing with the same view layer, but from completely different blocks, and that seems inefficient, we agree. And so it was kind of with that as high-level direction that we started talking more and more. First, we called them stripes. Then we realized, look, stripes, like that's kind of how the web looks today, but there's no reason that's how the web's going to look tomorrow.
Yeah.
For a while, we were calling them elements, and we realized, nah, we already have things.
Element's pretty good, but yeah, it's weird. Element is, you brought up the fact that element really is like the smallest possible thing.
Yeah.
So it's kind of weird that it is the thing containing other things.
Yeah, blocks feel like they should be bigger.
Can't really
than elements.
rethink those terms now.
Once
10 years
the
on
ship
in,
has sailed,
so,
yeah. We're looking at Adobe Experience Manager. They call them fragments, I think, or figments or something like that. I'm going to say fragments.
Fragments. Right. Figments is probably more accurate. But fragments,
in my mind, they're fragments. Regardless, I think as we look more and more about it, we realize what we're really talking about is containers, because you're wrapping, it is a container in the land of HTML. It's something that you would stick inside of two divs.
And stuff is inside it. Like,
yeah.
That's its very nature is meant to contain repeatable content.
Yeah. So with that said, are you in? Can you share your screen? I'm gonna let you drive.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna sit back here, and we're gonna.
Oh, it's easiest with 2 monitors. Well,
too bad.
That's great, but too bad. All right. I do have 2 monitors. Okay. So this is a concrete5 site running version 9. It has the SaaS-based version of the Elemental theme. So a lot of stuff on this is going to look a little funky. That's because this is actively deep in development. And we're going to go through a couple of these concepts that Franz talked about just now. I think the first thing to go through is the container itself. So if I log in to this site and head back, let's go back to the front end of our site. So here, as you can see, we've kind of got this repeatable content, and we accomplish most of that stuff in the sample content using layouts. So we have added layouts all across this, all vertically on down in on this page. All of this to the main area on the page. So main is the only thing that's actually in the template, and all of this stuff from here on down and up are either blocks or they are layouts inside that area. And that works pretty well, except layouts are a little restrictive because they only let you split up a div into, or a section of your page, into columns. And they don't really expose a lot of the advanced responsive functionality of modern grid systems. So there's the ability to have stuff float in different ways based on screen sizes and stuff like that. It's something we're never going to put into layouts because it's just too advanced, and you'll never, to expose that amount of functionality through the GUI is just something we haven't really found a great desire to do, because it's just the moment you expose some of it, you're going to have to add more. And you're never going to be able to replicate all that's possible in just sort of raw HTML. So we thought, wouldn't it be great if we could add something like layouts that let you add blocks into your page in HTML that you fully control. So that is what containers are. And if I actually open up, oh, this actually won't work because I'm not sharing my entire. I'm only sharing an application window, so we won't be able to take a sneak peek into the HTML that powers this, but we can go through the front end of it. So let's say I want to make a new page that has some of this rich layout functionality, containers that I'm talking about. Let's go in and add an empty page. Here's my main area and my page footer area. And if I added layouts here, I'd get the ability to split it into columns. But what if I want to do something a little bit more interesting? What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the page in edit mode and click the add button. And here in this left-hand area, I have blocks, clipboard stacks, and a new tab called containers. If I click here, you can see I've got 2 of them defined. These are defined in my theme. So themes can ship their own containers. Packages can also ship their own containers as well. So Elemental defines these. So if you install a different theme, you're going to get different containers. But you can actually install containers outside of a particular theme, meaning that if your containers adhere to the concrete5 theming guidelines, you can actually ship interesting container presets that can augment themes that you don't even design. So that's pretty cool. That's kind of something we've wanted to do for a long time, and we're taking a step toward in version 9. So I'm pretty excited about that. If I drag this 2-column accent into the main area, you can see that we've got, when I added this, I have something that's much more functional than your typical layout. Instead of just being able to split it into, 1 to 12 columns, which are only one level of columns, I actually have a top row here, and I have 2 columns underneath it. And then if I add content in there, it basically works just the same as if those layouts were, if those areas were actually a part of the template. But I can stack these things up, I can move them around, I can delete them as though they were layouts, but all this functionality stays grouped together, and it does not, it is all fully responsive, and you can add your own responsive logic into these templates. A lot of this is very similar to layouts. It just gives you a little bit more customizability of the actual content, since you can control fully the HTML that comes around these areas, just as though they were part of your page template. And another thing that's kind of cool about this came up as when I was demoing this to the team a couple weeks ago. Mike asked, how does this play with, can containers contain, the moment a developer sees this, they wonder, can containers contain containers, and can layouts contain them? And the answer is yes. Right now, it's not inconceivable that we might add the ability to limit some of this, but typically we'll just kind of let site editors deal with this, and then deal with that, with limiting that functionality at the workflow level. Like, don't make something that looks ugly, for example. If I go into a blog here, this is a pretty good example, because if I look in here, I believe this is, let's make sure that this is in fact, okay, that's not a good example, because that's not a container, or that's not a layout, that's an actual area. Okay, here we go, this is a good example. So this is a page built with layouts. Column 1 and column 2 are just layout areas added to the page. If I go into column 2 here, I can add a block, and I can choose my container. And if I choose this one in here, you'll see that it actually, since all this is built with Bootstrap 4, cool. By default, you kind of get that they are meant to nest pretty coherently. So you can just kind of nest your containers, nest your columns, and Bootstrap will always, a 12-column grid nested inside a 12-column grid will just kind of, the percentages will work themselves out. So this is 12 columns, but since it comes inside this subset of the page, everything just collapses naturally, and it will all kind of work itself out. So yeah, you can treat these just like they were anything else, and just nest them to your heart's content. Yeah, and so that is the sort of bespoke containers, kind of more for theme developers than anything else, because obviously your content editors are going to want to use these to build content on your site, but it's going to take a theme developer to make these things look nice on the back end. But you do have full control over the CSS and the HTML that builds these things. You can ship them in themes, you can ship them in their own packages, and we're really excited about that particular bit of functionality. The next thing that we're probably going to want to talk about are something that we're calling summary. I guess we're calling them summary objects or summary views. This is the problem that Franz was talking about with regards to pages and custom templates. So in Franz's example, you have a page list. If you've got something like this, where you've got an image on the left and content on the right, the moment that you switch to a different block, this is a page list block using a custom template, for example. The moment that you switch to a different block, perhaps one that you didn't even develop, that works with the page object, like a search block or the custom nav block that Franz is talking about, you have to rebuild this from scratch. You have to make a new custom template. You have to kind of, there's no, even if you're working with pages and your theme supports this really nice sort of summary view right here, you have to rebuild that custom template from scratch in order to make it work with a different block, which is crazy because both blocks work with page objects. Why can't the page object define its own summary view in order to show itself wherever you want, and then reuse that view anytime you want to show a list of pages, regardless of what block you're using? So we thought that that would be pretty cool to work with as well. And so that is why we are introducing something called summary templates. And I'm not actually sure where that is. There may not actually be a dashboard page for that. So what we will do is I will just show you that by going to this page directly. In version 9, there is this concept of a summary template that can be installed for different types of objects. By default, right now, there are pages and events supported. There's no reason why any object, like a file or there's some others that are escaping me.
User maybe?
The user, yeah,
Sure.
could use these. These summary templates work by kind of aggregating different bits of displayable data regardless of the object that's powering them. So the objects themselves say, hey, I'm a page. I've got a thumbnail, I've got a name, I've got a date. And the template itself says, oh, that's great. I've got a field for a thumbnail here to show on the left-hand side. And I show a date. And then if your page doesn't have access to, if your page hasn't been set up with a thumbnail, for example, it just loses the ability to use those templates. So for example, if I come into this composer, this blog post, there's this summary templates here. You can see, and these interfaces are subject to change. I have an all available templates here. And there's the default summary template, which shows a name and a description. And then there's one I'm calling thumbnail title description. And that one here, you can see, is powering this here. And if I go to a different page, like team, for example, one that doesn't have a thumbnail, if I go to summary templates here, it's not really working. Maybe that's well, what that is supposed to do is not let you choose that because you don't actually have a thumbnail. But I think what was more likely to happen is it will just ignore that because it knows that this page does not actually have a thumbnail object on it. And then what that lets you do is you can, from a particular page, we're going to have these summary templates. Some of them might get pretty rich in terms of their display. So we might have one that is a large masthead image, one that is this kind of left-hand thumbnail, right-hand piece of content. The real desire in the long run is to show these form factors in this page. And so when you come to a blog post and you curate it, and then you set up the thumbnail, you can come into the summary template and say, okay, this blog post looks great in this masthead image. It looks a little weird in this smaller image. Maybe I should change the thumbnail I chose because it looks strange. And then once you get that, you can choose which summary templates look good for this page. And then anytime that particular page is rendered at a particular size, with a particular form factor down here on the bottom of the page, or anywhere that this summary template is accessed, it's going to show one of the supporting templates. So you'll know that your page is always going to look good regardless of how it is displayed.
Well, that good looking content will come from the content that you're adding and not from the aggregation layer that you're designing. So if you've ever had a designer hand you like, hey, this is our news landing, and it's got like a big featured image and then two kind of sub-featured and then a bunch of detailed ones. And as a developer, you look at that and go, how do I decide what goes where? Like, is this featured flags? Like, what happens if they give me a bad thumbnail for this article? Like, the answers for that today aren't that great. It's like either I give them a featured flag when they're creating content and everybody wants their content to be featured, or like I have to build this category page by hand from it. And with this, as you add content, you can say, well, you know, this article I don't really have a thumbnail for, so it's not getting it. It'll look good. An article that does have a good looking thumbnail, it'll look good too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is how that works. And the summary content itself is actually one of the reasons that we decided to build it this way, where you have different objects feeding these shared templates. So you can have templates like this thumbnail title description actually will work across any, it will work for any piece of content, like a calendar event that provides the content that it needs. So one of the reasons we decided to do that is because we really are interested in having the ability to mix content together in different layers. And so that gets to the final thing that I wanted to show off a bit. This is something that we are calling boards. If you've been around concrete5 for a while, 5 or 6 years, you may remember something called the gathering. If you poke around the source, there actually is gathering code still in the source, although we're not actually using it and none of those blocks are actually installed. Those are getting ripped out as of version 9 because they are going to be replaced with something that actually is shipping and working. And it has to, because we've made promises around it. We need it. So, but the good news is that is coming, and it is coming in a way that is much more, the gathering was cool. It was a proof of concept way to bring in content in unified lists and kind of grids. This is the same concept, but actually shipping and building interfaces that we'll be able to use, and built in a way that I think will enable a lot more powerful stuff going down the line. So these are called boards. Boards are basically the way to aggregate content from different data sources using these summary templates or other templates, but they have a lot more exciting stuff that isn't quite done yet. Including the ability to actually insert blocks within these boards as well. So boards are not layouts exactly, although they build interfaces that look similar. I think the idea behind boards is you want to use these things if you want to take a little bit less of a hands-on approach to your content. You don't kind of abdicate responsibility completely. You get the ability to kind of move stuff around, pin things, add content within the boards. But it's sort of like adding a board to a coffee shop wall, where if this is going to be content that is kind of surfaced in organic, interesting ways, and if something comes out of it that looks cool, you can pin that and use it elsewhere, actually, because everything that goes into a board is actually a block. But it's sort of it's meant to kind of grow organically. Yeah. So let's
social feed.
Yeah. So let's make one. So I'm going to make one called just called blog grid, because I don't want to set up a calendar during this and take too long. So boards have templates. One that we're building right now is just kind of a list of stripes, but I have one that is sort of proof of concept that is a 3x3 grid. These are not stripes. These are actually just kind of bootstrap, a total of 9 slots. Once you add a board here in the dashboard, you can add data sources to that board. You see we've got pages and calendar events. It's no coincidence that these are the 2 objects that support summary views as well. If I add pages to my blog, I can just kind of choose what stuff makes it in there. Using just kind of your typical advanced search fields, you can stack them up, etc. I'm going to fill my board with blogs. And I'm going to add that in there. Weighting is something that is TBD, but you will eventually be able to determine how your content, what content in what ratio makes it into your data pool. Data pool is basically, once you've defined your data sources, you can pull content in and add to it. So if I click refresh pool and go back to data pool, you can see I've got 3 things in my blog entry source. I can stack multiple data sources up in here. So if I added, I could add project pages in here as well, along with calendar events, and RSS feed items. There's all kinds of stuff that we are thinking about in the big picture. Once I've got that, I can build a board instance. So I've got 3 blog entries in my data pool, but I have no front end boards that make use of these things. So if I click generate, it's going to make one for me. it's going to make one for me. So if I create this, eventually you'll be able to add this on the front end of the site. But we make board instances that are separate from boards and separate from the actual usage on the front end of the site, because we want to make it performant and sort of cache as much stuff as possible. And we want to make it so that you can build a board that works a certain way and then reference that board in different spots on your site without having to worry about, like, for example, if I've got a calendar board on every page of a certain type and it's going to be filtering by a particular category, I don't necessarily want 40, 50, 100 boards. I want one board because it always works the same, and I want different instances of that board on the site. That will let me kind of get content sharing and the ability to push content to multiple places at once in a sane way. So you generate an instance here, and then you can take a look at it. So here you can see I have built a board basically, and it chooses from summary templates here. Since my blog posts use both the basic board template or the basic summary template as well as this left aligned summary template that we saw on the front end of the site, it just kind of picks one at random. In the future, we're going to make it so, before release, we're going to make it so that you can kind of limit these templates to the types of ones you want to show. So you know, hey, I'm building something. Don't give me the template that is the basic template. I only want to show stuff that's got images. And if you don't have an image, then you're going to just have to, you're not going to make it into this board. Yeah. And there's going to be additional summary or sorting controls and things like that, filtering stuff, although a lot of that filtering will happen at the data source level as well. And then, yeah, once you define an instance, you can say, no, that's not great. I want to re-roll that instance. And you can just kind of let it generate once till you find one that looks good to you. Or you can go in here, change these things on the fly. Say, this is great, except this one needs to get swapped out. This one gets pinned. Once you edit the instance to your liking, you can add it on the front end of your site using the board block. And that will kind of get you where you need to go. And
yeah, anytime a designer's making, well, here's the blog post, and as I keep scrolling down, there's a series of related articles at the end, and they all have goofy layouts depending on, we don't know what. This is how you would do that. Or when I come to /blog, and well, how does this look like a newspaper? This is how you would do that. So
yeah, and the idea, like, if I've got these different pages in my site, and I've got different pieces of content, like it doesn't have, too often we find people using express objects are another great example of things that will eventually make it into this as well. Because express objects can link to pages, so it makes a lot of sense that you'd want to show an express object in a list. But too often that means people, since pages have historically had all this functionality with templates and, you know, thumbnails and showing things on the front end of your site in a list, people build all these nice page list custom templates. Well, that means everything has to be a page. And that's why we've had in the past people thinking like, well, I have to make pages for these things because I want to show them on my site in a nice grid, and I need a page list template to do that. And we were thinking, no, the fact that the type of content should not drive the way that you want to show it on your site. So we wanted to decouple the actual display logic of showing anything from the thing that it's showing. So that is kind of where this is coming from and where this is going.
So you'd be able to pull these off of express objects in the picture as well. Cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I see that happening sooner rather than later, given some of our various commitments.
Super cool. Yeah. Well, nice job, Andy.
Thank you.
All right. So I bet we maybe have some questions.
Yeah, I've got some questions. Most of them are about containers, but one's about boards. So we'll work our way backwards.
Okay.
Boards. So I believe it was Jay Steele was asked. Jay Steele 12 was asking, will boards support containers?
Yes, they will, because interestingly enough, behind the scenes, all those of that generated grid you saw, those 9 slots get filled by the summary content. That's actually 9 instances of a different block showing board data. So in the big picture, boards will get the ability to have content inserted into their slots that is any kind of block type, including blocks that you say, hey, I want to put content of my own design in this board. And it's not necessarily that example that I showed with the 9 slots. You wouldn't necessarily use containers in those because they're 9 tiny slots. But one of the most compelling aspects of containers that we're seeing, and kind of the thing we're building first for production, are boards that are groups of large slots. So what we call stripes. Those are actually going to be, what we see using content boards for in the immediate future is having the ability to have 10 to 15 to 20 slots with some progressive loading as you scroll down the page that gets these large pieces of content within them. Large featured articles, large stripes of content, slots that contain multiple other pieces of summary content inside them. And yes, when you do that, you have these large, nice board slots. You really want to be able to say, hey, I want to put a nice piece of content in here, and I don't want it to just be dumb HTML or a full width content block. I want to show that, I want to put that accent, to that 3 area 2 column accent block the container that we showed earlier. I want to put that in the middle of the board. And yeah, you will be able to do that because boards contain blocks, and at its core, containers are much like layouts and just another block type behind the scenes.
Way for content editors to curate a page.
Yeah.
So Stu Black 23 is noting the similarity between boards and doing the same sort of thing, well, similar thing with a page list block. So he's asking if it's just used for creating dynamic content the same way as a page list block, or what's the subtle differences there?
Well, page list block is going to give you a list of pages in the site.
Yeah.
And then you can make a template for that to bring back data that's associated with the pages for the site. This, I think, would be kind of take a step back and up. This lets you build a list of anything. So calendar events, people, stuff out of Express. So maybe you got a site where you're like, look, we want to set up a database of all of the vacation rentals we have for sale. And we're going to do that in Express. Well, now you could start to aggregate those. You could mix that in with news from the blog and all sorts of different stuff. So
yeah,
far more flexible than the page list template.
Yeah, it's interesting. Don't get worried. I don't see these blocks going away. They're never going away.
Page list template is fine for what it does.
But it's interesting. If you had a way to think about this is if you had this from the beginning, there would likely be no page list, file list, or Express entry list blocks. There would be no dedicated listing blocks because this thing does all the listing you need and more. It can unify your lists. It can unify all 3 of those blocks and can take the results from any of them and put them together. It can share templates between them. So the moment that if you build a nice template for a page, you can immediately reuse it for any Express object, provided that Express object exposes the data that the page object exposes.
So, I mean, another example, we recently had a client that they're like, we have a resources section, and it's got a list of resources. Great. Sometimes they have images, sometimes they have little play video thumbnails, sometimes they don't, and sometimes, but it's basically every resource is it's a resource. It's pretty well named.
Yeah.
But to build that today, you kind of have to make this compromise choice of, well, I mean, I guess you could do it as, well, look, we're going to build a completely new data type called resource. We're going to build a dashboard page for it. I'm making an application inside of concrete5, and concrete5 gives you nice tools to do that. But wow, time is an issue. You could, you could do it several ways. Where we usually end up doing it is saying, well, look, we're going to make a page for each resource. And if your resource really is just a link at Yahoo, then we'll add an attribute link to that page saying, here's the link. And we'll have another attribute that is a flag saying, just follow the link. And when I'm building that list view, now I can still use the page list block to display the resources, but I'm not ever going to go to that page. I've just made this page as a way to deal with data on the back end. And that feels really goofy, right? A client's just like, why, really?
Now
adding pages for this?
Yeah. Now you've got them showing up in your sitemap.xml, unless you do a bunch of custom code and
slowing down your site, because now every time you use the auto nav, it's got to traverse that many more pages.
Yeah.
So this is instead of thinking about listing data from the bottom up, we're thinking about listing stuff from the top down.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
Couple questions focused just on containers, getting away from the boards here.
Sure.
I do see a couple of people typing, so other stuff might come in.
Oh boy.
Really basic one. Do containers have their own template files?
Yes, they do, and I would have shown those, but I set StreamYard up to just record a single window of my machine, and I didn't really want to.
But super flexible.
But yes, they just are. They are template files. If you've ever worked with page template and seen the area syntax, it's not named area, but you will be right at home editing those, and they can ship inside a themes folder within a particular themes elements directory or within a packages elements directory.
Can I ask a preemptive question?
Sure.
Does all of this mean that layouts will be deprecated?
No, it does not. So there are you're free to use these tools, and they will continue to work for the foreseeable future. It's possible that some of the Bootstrap 4, some of the challenges with moving to jQuery 3 and Bootstrap 4 may change how some of those layouts work. It may, I'm not sure that draggable handles interface will persist till the end, but that's just an implementation detail. We're not turning those off or changing how they work, or even changing the grid framework that makes it possible to build those layouts that work with your themes grid, like Bootstrap 4 or Foundation. Those are all still going to work. They serve different purposes, and as you continue to use them, you can it actually makes a lot of sense, because I don't know that you're ever going to want to make, to have 15 containers just to have ones that are like, 2/3 column, 1/3 column, like there is a place for both of those. And I think they'll actually work really nicely together, because you can already see that container, that accent, 2-column container one that I showed earlier. Like, there's nothing stopping you from taking that and splitting that large column at the top into two other columns, and then that, you get that flexibility. It's really more for giving people the ability to have these really rich containers that have lots of responsive controls, and for things like giving the theme developer another tool for chopping themes that have lots of weird little edge cases. Like, we are working with a theme right now that has lots of markup in spots that make it difficult to chop without making the entire page just kind of a hard-coded page template with like a million different areas. And so with containers, you can chop portions of your page and just call them things like, this is the about stripe, or this is the testimonial stripe, because my theme developer put a bunch of crazy classes in here, and it's going to be easier for me to just chop this entire half of the page into a container, and then I can reuse it. I can use a single basic page template and just pop different containers into them, and it's just another tool, but one that I think will make building certain types of sites much easier and much more enjoyable.
Yeah, so all this stuff gives you more of the kind of atomic design elements. Hey, I want to treat this thing as one, and be able to put it in different places, maybe even feed different content to it. Whereas layouts started out very much as I just need to split this area into two.
Yeah,
I didn't expect that was going to happen from the get-go, but now I need a column off to the side, and that's what we originally built it for. It works well for that. There's a bunch of GitHub issues around, hey, could it also, and kind of starts to describe some of these problems. And so we're kind of separating that moving forward.
Yes.
Cool. All right. Another technical question. This one's from John the Fish about icons. So can developers add their own, quote, layout icons for a new container, and can developers add their own icons for page templates?
They already can through some kind of, I remember we took in a pull request a long time ago that lets you add page template icons if you define a particular file set. It's not the best solution, but it was one that was offered, and it works. The icons are all shipped in particular locations, so we haven't put in. I think at this point there's a central pool of icons for each of these different types: page templates, container templates, summary templates, and they're just kind of this stock list that we use for these types of things. I think it's likely that we will try to make that list better in version 9 and more. We kind of phoned it. We got a few good ones in there, and then just kind of stopped. I think it's more likely that we'll buff out that list and let you choose from them than let you define a new location for those. It's not something we're opposed to. It's just there's only so much time in the day. But yeah. I think,
I'd say strategically that makes sense.
Yeah,
we're not sitting here saying like you should only ever use our blue layout icons. So tactically there's only so much time in the day. But if you want to make it easy for us to approve the ability to upload a new icon for any of these objects, I think that would probably be well received.
Yeah, and I think a lot of they also are, I can't remember. I think, it's not something we're opposed to. We're doing our best not to hard code any of the icon locations.
That's a yes.
Yeah.
Cool. Catalysis says containers look great.
Yeah.
And will there be a way to add classes to a container or some other way to modify one?
So it's interesting. So since containers are just sort of HTML like anything, they look like mini page templates basically. You can always just add a class to a container as a developer by just adding a class to that container. And so the way that the grid works, Bootstrap is pretty forgiving about, nest your container inside a div that has its own class or give it an ID. Now, if you're asking on the fly, which I think you probably were, since containers are blocks, it's very possible that what will come to containers, much like it came to layouts, is the ability to edit the style properties of that block in the page, just like we did eventually do for layouts. Practically, there's no edit icon for that in the interface today, because since they are their own special thing, you kind of have to deal with them in one-off situations. So right now there's a delete button and there's an edit button. Or a delete button and a move button. I think it's likely that it's certainly not impossible for us to add the ability to put a little like paint brush up there, whatever, that gives you the ability to add classes to it. I expect, much like it did for layouts, that would come in like a 9.1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think fundamentally it kind of begs the question of,
there's so many controls in that styles thing.
How is this making it easier for a content editor?
Yeah, right. Are you going to want to really write a line the entire cycle?
Maybe. I guess there's always things that we don't.
Yeah, no.
Most of what happens is stuff that we didn't predict. So I don't think that we're fundamentally against it, but I guess what we would ask is that really the answer that is the easiest for a content creator? We have wireframes where you're kind of picking a summary template against a page, and it's just a list of stuff that you could absolutely do with styling controls. It could very much be the same template, but just a different class on it. But as a content creator, I want to add a blog post, and I want to look at this list and be like, yeah, on this one, if I left align the title, I can't see it because the background image is white there. So I'm going to right align it, and I want to just be able to pick that. Boom, 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 boom. It looks good here. It doesn't look good there. And so, might you also be able to add more styling controls kind of in the board when you're just, I guess, but like you're saying, 9 point something, because I don't want that to accidentally make it so at kind of, that we can say, oh yeah, well the answer is you go in here and do 15 different things and then you can get what it is that you're looking for. The idea here is to make it simple for a content creator to know what their stuff is going to look like and kind of choose the way it looks good and choose the way it looks bad, no matter where it is referenced from. Ooh, that came out well. Yeah, that's what I mean.
Okay, cool.
What else you got?
John the Fish has a couple of questions about nesting. Two of them related to each other, or 2.5 here. If containers can be nested, can stack functionality also be extended so that stacks can be nested? And then related to that, if you can have a container within a container, then fundamentally, is there any different risk to nesting the stacks? So sort of extending from that. So nesting the stacks, basically.
I'm going to let you handle that one, my friend.
Well, there's I do think that this isn't exactly what you asked, but this is a good time to mention it. One thing that I would like to be able to do in this is to improve the stacks interface in the page. We've done a little bit of work with that in order to make it faster, but one thing that stacks don't do at all right now is they don't take any theming into account. And I think that's because we thought that blocks that came in stacks were kind of meant to be, I don't know why we thought this, like they were going to be, that was going to be a pool of data. And so you didn't need a theme, that you're just dumping data in there. But that's silly because a lot of times stacks are like, this is your sidebar or whatever, and then you absolutely need theming data in there to make it look nice. I mean, we've clearly worked without it, so it's not a huge problem. But yeah, so what I would like to see done is I would like to actually add support for themes in stacks and add container support into stacks so that you can use stacks to kind of have preset blocks filled with content that you can add throughout your site. So in my example of like, I'm building this testimonial slider for this Dreamers theme that we've used for some documentation efforts, you know, that shows up on different pages. And, you know, it's all well and good to say you add your about Stripe container to a page. Well, now I've got 4 empty block areas, but I still have to configure the blocks. I still have to add the image. Maybe I have to even add a custom template or two. I still have to go through a lot of work to make it look good. And just because I have that outer container of HTML, I'm not guaranteed to have something that looks great. And then moreover, if I have to do it again on a different page, I have to, you know, repeat all those steps or use the clipboard, but that's not immediately intuitive either. So what I would like to see happen is I'd like to see themes extend stacks to work well with containers and work with themes so that stacks, if you choose to use them this way, can become these reusable content elements like the global clipboard that we kind of wanted them to be in the first place. And so what you get is you would be able to go to an empty page that you're building out and say, hey, I'm building out a new page, and so I'm going to add my content at the top, but the page looks pretty plain, and so I want to add some content at the bottom. Hey, I've got this featured events stack that I've used, you know, a bunch of other places. It shows 2 different events, one on the left, one on the right. It always looks good. It's editable through the CMS, so I'm just going to drag that from my stack into the page, and it's guaranteed to look good. It's using containers to split those columns in half. Yeah, so I think in the big picture, containers are absolutely something that we want to make work with stacks. I know it's not what you asked, but it's something that we wanted to mention. In terms of stacks nesting inside of stacks, I'm not really sure why you'd want to do that, for example, especially now that we've added folders to stacks, which kind of gives you the ability to do some of that stuff. You can definitely nest folders inside of folders and then add stacks within them. So I guess if you could, just trying to figure out what the use case for nesting stacks would be.
I mean, what if you had like a sidebar and you wanted to have like a title, short paragraph, and click here to get the white paper. So you got a few different blocks there.
Sure.
That's kind of your call to action for the white paper stack. But then you wanted to have like, you know, that was an element, and it's going to show up in a sidebar and pages in different ways. So you might have a larger stack that's kind of like a left-hand side of marketing or of About Us pages, and that's got that element, but it's also got, you know, a map and for Contact Us, and you know, so now you want to put that on half a dozen pages, but within it you want to use this collection of 3 blocks that you've built. That's really fundamentally it's just the get a white paper thing, but it's a title and a paragraph. And I don't know. I'm making it up, John.
Yeah, that's no, it's interesting. I suppose I could see having, you know, you've got your stack that is something like, you know, basic elements, and inside it you've got your map, whatever that is, and you configure that to look the way you want. And then then you make another folder that is like sidebars or whatever, and then those are actually your 3 different sidebar treatments, and at the bottom of each one you could put your map stack in there, and then so you know, hey, if I need to update this map, I go into the map like that stack, and then I know that those 3 stacks that I may have referenced elsewhere are going to pull from the thing. That does make sense to me. I can see the use case for that. At first, I was trying to figure out whether you meant, I thought you meant nesting stacks, like adding the ability to have a stack that contains another stack at the data level. You know, you drill into a stack to add more blocks or something like that. What it sounds like we're describing is more the ability to just add that stack block, which you can add on the front end, into a stack itself, so that you could reference it elsewhere. I don't see, there's nothing technically challenging about that. I think we just don't show it in the list of blocks that we let you add to a stack. So yeah.
Another strategically, sure, technically it's not a huge priority, but I can see that would save us time occasionally. There's things that I got a footer, got a bunch of things in it, and then I want to contain those in a larger thing, and I can kind of see it. Yeah. What else you got, Mike?
We got probably way more questions than we have time for, but I think there are probably 2 more that we could get through relatively quickly. One is from Stu Black, and he's basically asking about how they're sort of structured. Does a container have a specific PHP file where they're defined, and how are they independent of a theme?
They can be independent of a theme, or they can be shipped with a theme. So actually, let's.
Well, we only have a few minutes.
Yeah,
yes, they
enough.
do. They do have a PHP template file.
Yeah, and they can be inside an elements directory within your theme, or they can be inside an elements directory within a package if they get installed in a package.
It begs a preemptive question that I had.
And they look just like
switch my ring so
templates.
I would remember. Or something that I think probably bears more discussion than I see it getting, perhaps, in the community. I'll throw that out there. All of this assumes that your site is built with Bootstrap 4. Just laying that on the table, that with concrete5 version 9, there is a strong assumption that you are using Bootstrap 4 to power your public theme. Like we're using it for the core, but in the past, we've always had a very, well, we started with a super agnostic approach of like, look, dude, you could build a template out of tables and put 2 lines of PHP in there and be able to edit content. And then with version 7, I think we started to introduce more, you have to use Sass for if you want to use the theme customizer less, sorry.
Yeah.
And now, like, I think we're taking a further step towards, again, it's open. I mean, we're not going to keep you from doing stuff. So if you really want to say, look, I'm not going to use any of this and I'm going to use my own grid system, and thank you very much. But we're taking the approach of if we know that your theme is Bootstrap 4, then we can do much more interesting stuff with containers and summary templates, and maybe we could have those independent of a theme and even have a marketplace of those that would work in somebody else's theme. And, that's a huge change. So
it's true. We have built some block templates in the past that are part of the core that kind of use Bootstrap markup. They're so that they look nice in Bootstrap themes. They won't break in non-Bootstrap themes, but they just kind of get some of that extra functionality for like responsive images or images that have a max width or something like that. We're going to be doing more of that in this. Again, it's nothing about this is going to break if your site is built on Foundation. But it is interesting because when I say containers can be a part of a theme, that means that you can build containers that use markup that only your theme provides, or that only you're guaranteeing your theme provides. And that's nice because that means that that they won't show up in Elemental and do nothing or look weird when I try to apply them, because that's been a problem before. So now a lot of blocks and custom templates are at the theme level if they're using stuff that Elemental provides explicitly. But beyond that, we are introducing in version 9 the concept of a concrete5 theme framework, basically, that is a superset of Bootstrap 4. It's pretty much just Bootstrap 4 at this point, but we call it a superset because as we continue to add stuff that we find useful to theme developers, like mega menu functionality, we want to be able to say, hey, this is part of the concrete5 theme framework. And if your theme supports that, anyone buying your theme from the marketplace is guaranteed to have a pleasant experience if they install stripes or summary templates that also work with the theme foundation. And that's really the idea that we've been chasing for 10 years, is this ability to have a marketplace that can actually augment your site in, you know, delightful ways that aren't guaranteed to just kind of break. And so that's kind of
from the atomic level.
Yeah.
When we first started, the web looked fugly enough that you could get away with
no,
it.
it's true.
Right?
It's like everything looks like a hodgepodge, and that's cool.
We had a Superfish add-on that dropped down menus in your site, and we sold an embarrassingly large amount of that. Like, you would never be able to do that with a theme today, because themes are so bespoke that everything has to come with that stuff. By committing to say, look, you know, again, it's open source, and like under the hood, you can do whatever you want, but if you're kind of using it the way we intend, it's going to be Bootstrap 4 plus, C plus, just 1 plus. That gives us a flexibility to kind of make some assumptions and make these individual components work better together. So I would just offer that as something that probably deserves some oh really, like I mean, I don't know.
And there's definitely, you know, this quick but it's accurate. So we will be happy to answer questions about it in the containers GitHub thread. Again, nothing about this is making it impossible to build a theme in any way you want. It's just by opting into Bootstrap as the way to build your theme, you're going to get access to more ways to extend it.
Well, and I think, you know, we have always tried to, you know, when I talk about what makes concrete5 unique for people, I will always talk about balancing a developer's need with a site owner's need and trying to be right in the middle, and how many CMSs kind of are, you know, on one end, you know, very kind of content creator focused with, for example, maybe WordPress. On the other hand, maybe much more developer focused with something like perhaps Drupal. We try to be right in the middle, always find that balance. And historically, I think we would have shied away from making a
pretty big
framework choice. And I think we've just reached a point in 2020 where we're like, nope, the advantages that we get by just all agreeing to use this outweigh the flexibility first and foremost. So.
The web is just so integrated now that you can't, like, for example, even just something as simple as a form that submits that has like validation states or something like that. If you don't make a choice about the way that you're going to support something like that and just kind of go all in on, like, you're going to have to choose something, whether it's going to be your own custom validation handler or, you know, something else. So we've chosen one that has the highest adoption, that, you know, is attractive, has a lot of components. And
I mean, the fact that nobody has noticed and complained makes me think that we probably should have done it a while ago. It's a great decision. So if it's not, now's the time.
We've suffered from being like kind of already doing this, just not explicitly, and no one knowing that we're really kind of like, there's enough Bootstrap markup in the blocks right now that like probably should have just made this.
Yeah, we've had this thing with jQuery too. Like, how do I use jQuery? All right, well,
well, there's just one last question to take us out. I mean, universally, based on the discussion here, it's very positive. People are very excited. Lots of comments about, you know, I wish this was available yesterday because I'm finishing projects that would have made it easier. The last thing to sort of take us out would probably be any thoughts for alternate names for containers.
I didn't think we were going to get away with not answering this question.
That's all right.
That's why I stopped you.
Last question.
Naming is such a delightful challenge. I love naming. I don't know, guys. I mean, we went through many names for many weeks, months of meeting over pizza, going, can we call them Shoobadoos? Like,
naming my kids was like 100 times easier than this round of
I guess I would offer a few thoughts on naming. Containers describes what it does. I mean, of all the names that we have cycled through in our kind of ever more detailed architecture documents, containers work really well. Occasionally you find yourself talking about can containers contain containers, which is a bit of a mouthful.
Yeah, it is.
But compared to some of the other ones that we had, there was one that we were going for a while that was like, my goodness, that's a lot of consonants. I would ask, like, well, what is the challenge? I know we already have containers as
we already have collections,
part of layouts in there. Collections would be a good one.
That's one we don't really talk about too. That's not what we talk about.
You know, and there is so much stuff in the core, like you mentioned, the gathering block. Like, you know, we've been open source for a decade. We were closed source for 5 years before that. So there is stuff under the hood in there. You are going to be hard pressed to find an English word that is not somehow used somewhere in the code base of concrete5. I mean, didn't we have what was the really embarrassing one that we had?
Are you talking about piles?
Piles. We have piles in there. I mean,
that's still in there.
Yeah,
Maybe.
somewhere there's piles doing something. So I mean, I think if the
There's a
concern
pile of
is, look,
something.
dude, if I search the source, I already find that word in there, then the ship has sailed on that kind of concern. Like, as we said earlier, layouts aren't going to be deprecated, but they have less of a use case in the if you're thinking several years in the future, layouts are kind of like almost a gotcha tool. Ooh, I just need to quickly use a layout to move this stuff over. So the fact that the word containers may show up in something that layouts uses, I think is a manageable liability. Those are layout containers, not just container containers,
Yeah, it's tough. This question is
I mean, if there were a dramatically better word to use for it, that'd be nice to know. A fair amount of work has gone into making it work the way it is, so I can't say that would be necessarily where I'd want to spend my money, but I definitely get that naming is hard. I'd encourage you guys to think about it and tell us how we're wrong on this, but this is how we got there. We went through a dozen different names. Containers was the best, and we got to a point where like, let's please just build it.
Yeah.
So that's where we are today.
That sums it up.
Yeah, that's all right. But I totally get it. Like, it is absolutely, as soon as you put something in the sand, you're like, we're going to be stuck with that. And it's easy to rethink about it. So I encourage the debate, but we're focused on building the thing. So yeah, well, we said this was going to be a shorter than normal town hall, and we were going to do it with alacrity because we had other stuff to do, and we managed to go over and totally not do any of that. But feels like it was well worthwhile because this is pretty cool stuff, and it's exciting to see it working. And we are actively, you're almost out of juice, dude.
It was full when we started.
I mean, the other thing I can offer to kind of take us out is, I know we just mentioned any number of things that are in the core that have gone nowhere, and the gathering block was a super cool demo 5 years ago as well. This is all part of a site that is being actively delivered to the U.S. Army now, so it's pretty important we get it right, and it's definitely going to ship. So
you will see this in version 9.
Get in there and look around because this is happening, and that's what I know.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think it's time to. The last thing I'll say is next month we're going to do this on a different couch, so it doesn't look like Andy is coming down from the clouds to bless us with the good word, because Andy's coming out of the white. So
It's January 7th.
January 7th. Yeah, all right, that sounds good. Hangover will be done by then. All right, thank you, everybody. See you in a month.
Bye.